I mean, it's kind of like big data. It's kind of a buzzword right now. Everybody says they're doing it, but nobody knows what they're doing, but everybody's got a demo.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is September 9th, and this is the beginning of season 2 of The Pirates of Clean Tech. I'm Eric Planey,
Hello, I'm Lucas Finko.
and we have to start off with Happy Global Electric Vehicle Day?
I think so, yes.
Happy Global EV Day. Yar,
Yar,
yar.
yar. That's right. Welcome aboard, mateys.
Well, we had a good 3 weeks off, I think, from our end wrap party for season 1, where we had our friend Rob Parker on. See, look at this. I'm not even drinking today, and I can't even get people's names right.
Yeah, we had a great time off. We got so much accomplished. We have an exciting season 2 coming up, some great guests, some extra features, which you may have already seen if you're subscribed and you have the little alert button clicked, then you already know what the new features are. So make sure you go ahead and do that and subscribe to the follow us on whatever podcast service you use.
Lucas gave a nice little hint right there, so I think I'll just gonna run with that. But you all think that this is a podcast where we're trying to inform the public about what's going on in the world of clean tech, but really this is me living out my midlife crisis by trying to do something a little bit more fun. And one of my life goals in my midlife crisis was to always be the guy on TV, the Motor Week guy. If you remember John Davis, is it John Davison on PBS?
I think
I've
so.
always loved that show. And Lucas and I had a great conversation during the off season, and we thought one thing we can do to really enhance what we're doing at Pirates of Clean Tech is to start reviewing electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. So if you click on our YouTube page, it probably won't be on our podcast, but we're starting a series where we're going to be looking at electric vehicles and hybrids. And most car reviews, car review shows, when they review electrics, they do a very good job of addressing certain issues about the car where it's different than a conventional gasoline engine. But we're going to really try to take that a step further. And we created a rating system that really addresses all the facets of electric vehicles and what you need for them. And so I think we started already. It's going to be posting today. But our friend Jack Eiley in Denver, Colorado has reviewed a 2017 BMW i3. A very nice car, I might add.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about it also. I'm much more of a Top Gear kind of guy, so we'll see what kind of crazy things I can do on my review. I'll be reviewing the 2019 Chevy Bolt, which I love, so it'll be a good time.
It's going to be a good time. But one thing I will say is that during our feedback from people during the off season between season 1 and season 2, people wanted to talk a little bit more about that renewable energy and sustainability. Doesn't seem like it's something affordable for the average person, or it's not something that is really discussed in that context. So our first car review is our good friend Jack, and he visited a dealership in Boulder, Colorado called Green Eyed Motors. I think it's greeneyedmotors.com, the website. And they deal exclusively in selling used hybrid and electric vehicles, which is a fantastic concept. And, a brand new BMW i3 is probably going to run you high in the 30s, 40,000, depending on the model you buy. But a used one becomes a very good value proposition. And there's a lot of used Priuses out there, used Volts, used Bolts, used Nissan Leafs, used Teslas that are definitely more affordable for people. In some states, although not many, actually will give you a tax credit for even purchasing a used hybrid or electric vehicle.
Yep, that's true. And oftentimes you can get a great deal on a used EV. Although I think right now everybody's crazy for cars, crazy for used vehicles, and prices might be high right now. But after this whole COVID madness goes away, that may be the best way to get a good deal. I can tell you our battery has not degraded any in 2 years. It's still fantastic. The maintenance has been almost zero. I mean, you'll find out all this stuff in the review, but the maintenance has been almost zero. It's just a fantastic total cost of ownership deal. So, yeah, definitely look into that.
Yeah, and just to let you know, so we actually are starting our EV and hybrid reviews where our friend Jack is interviewing the owner of Green Eyed Motors. And I think he gives a great perspective about that market and that industry. And Lucas, your point, absolutely, used car sales are skyrocketing right now as part of kind of the myriad of situations we're involved in with the COVID crisis. But the value proposition for owning a used vehicle, a used EV or hybrid, is fantastic. And you hit the nail on the head. It's really about cost of ownership. And that is something over time that you really capture any premium that you may have paid versus a comparable gasoline powered car.
Yeah, and there's a ton of great chargers out there. There's a great network that's getting bigger every day. That's another New Jersey, New York tit for tat, which we haven't covered yet, is how much money each one's putting into their charging infrastructure. So maybe we'll bring that up next week.
Ooh, sounds good. Ooh. New York, New Jersey smackdown continues.
Round, what are we on? Round 4 now? 3, 4? Jeez.
We have to continue our fusion smackdown too, which that could be really heated. Pun intended. Well, we don't have a guest this week. We decided to just kick off season 2 very casually, kind of the post-Labor Day slide into our groove. And so we picked some really good articles. A couple of them are really deep dives. So we probably should get right into them, shouldn't we? One of my favorite publications, literally since I was in college, is the Financial Times. As I used to say, the British Wall Street Journal. Their journalism is fantastic. Their in-depth articles are great. And so on September 2nd, they had, as part of what they call the Big Read, they had a story called the U.S. and Climate, New York's bold green plans hit opposition. And I think for anybody who's involved in the public-private partnership development of green energy, whether you're on the development side working on large-scale projects, or you're on the state government regulatory side working either at the state level, local level, or some sort of, port authority or development agency, this is a must-read article. Now, I think it could be under a paywall, so hopefully with our video you can get a little bit of a skim of it. But if you have access to this article, I highly recommend it. And it's really long, so I'm not going to get into all the tenets, but effectively, what I liked about this was the fact that it really addresses New York State and what their goals are. And Governor Cuomo, I would say, right with California and Colorado, probably one of the most aggressive governors in terms of greening his power generation. He has the goal of getting to 70% electricity generation from renewable sources by 2030. And by 2040, he wants it zero carbon. He wants it all renewable energy. Mm-hmm. Now, there's some caveats, though, that we should talk about up front. One of which is, if you look at their renewable energy generation right now, I believe 44% of it currently is coming from one source, and that is the massive Niagara Dam hydroelectric facility right by Niagara Falls and the Niagara River. Lucas and I were talking about this last week a little bit offline about how, dams, of course, are a 4-letter word, pun intended, because a lot of times the ecosystem in developing a dam gets damaged. And there was we looked this one up too, and it's actually referenced in the article that this one had, similar damage to the ecosystem where some tribal Indian lambs were sacrificed for this dam creation. But hydroelectric power is a clean source of energy. We should also bring up the fact that a lot of clean energy, quote unquote, by New York standards, is based on nuclear. But New York State is actually going to lose some nuclear in the coming days with the Indian Point power plant going offline, I think next year. So for them to get to 100% renewable generation by 2040 is a significantly arduous task. What's really good about this story is the fact that it talks about some developments on some solar farms in upstate New York, which of course many people think are a good thing. But these solar farms are also going into small rural areas that actually may be sacrificing agricultural use as a result. So once again, we get to that paradigm where there's trade-offs. So some clean energy you think is always going to be great and wonderful for the economy. But in terms of true sustainability, if you're sacrificing ag land, then there's a lot of opposition to it, and it may not be the best use. So this article really goes into the pros and cons of a lot of development taking place and how there's been very good coordination from an agency that Lucas and I know very well called NYSERDA. But at the same time, sometimes that planning on a state level doesn't translate into pure 100% receptiveness by local communities, especially in rural areas. And so I think it's just really kind of a signal, if you will, this article, to a lot of regional governments that are looking at doing more of a clean energy generation portfolio, that you really have to do a 360 review of the planning process. And you have to take in consideration, like, optimal use of land. Is it going to be solar farms or is it going to be wind farms? And will agriculture suffer as a result of that? How does the local community feel about that? And so, one of the couple of conclusions I had from this is that even the best of intentions at the state level doesn't translate into popularity of the project locally. So, you have to be in consideration of that. The one thing that I thought also that this article really starts making me think more about is if you take a state like New York, which is an old industrial state, and you take that all the way to Wisconsin, Minnesota, the former Rust Belt, as they call it, there's a lot of parts of those states that have brownfields that can be redeveloped for current industrial use. But in a lot of cases, a lot of that brownfield land cannot be developed from a practical standpoint. It's not necessarily about environmental remediation, but it's really more about the fact that this land is in a section now that isn't logistically in the best spot. A lot of industrial areas in the older parts of the United States were developed close to waterways because of barge traffic or because of railways with rail lines. But now the world of logistics has moved where really it's about highways and some rail. So a lot of brownfields can be redeveloped into more greener usage like solar farms, and it wouldn't have the NIMBY resistance from local communities. So it's a great article. I really recommend getting into it. There's a lot of stats up there, a lot of definitional paradigms, if you will, where we're talking about what is clean energy, is nuclear clean energy, is hydro clean energy. And I just think it's a very thought-provoking article. And Lucas, just want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good information in here. Um, you know, I've talked before about, why would farmers oppose solar? I mean, I tend to think it's obvious that solar absorbs sunlight and you need sunlight to grow plants. So you
Right.
can't do both, right? So that's why a lot of farmers would prefer wind, right? Because they can put up wind turbines and they can still grow their crops because it's using the wind and not the sunlight directly. And they even mention in here that the revenues from wind projects have been a lifeline to farmers as low milk prices have hammered the dairy business. So there's a lot of this interplay between state and global interests and the local needs. Like, for instance, they give an opposing view where a local town was against a large wind project and the state just dismissed their concerns. So we don't want to see that either. And I absolutely love also this graphic they have, which is very ironic. So they show where the support for climate action tends to be in urban liberal areas, much less so in the rural areas, that are much more conservative. But that's where you see all the wind farms. All the wind farms are in the rural areas.
Right.
So I think this analytics here really tells an interesting story.
I do too. And um, I think that's a great graph and totally recommend people to go on our YouTube page to take a look at it if you cannot access the article. Lucas is pausing it here for a few seconds. The other point I forgot to bring up in my description on the article is that New York is roughly going to spend about $4 billion in subsidies in order to build out its clean energy portfolio over the next 20 years. And you think that's a lot, but the statistic that they bring out is they estimate about $15.7 billion in society benefits from having clean energy in New York State. And I think a lot of that is on the healthcare sector, which we obviously saw the healthcare sector get pummeled this year in the COVID crisis. So talking about the ecological environmental recovery in a post-COVID economy, clean energy, as we always have talked about, has those benefits to society. So I like the fact that this article brings up the fact that NYSERDA, who's a great, great organization, is doing their homework and has put in, yes, $4 billion is a lot of money, especially with government coffers being constrained, but getting $16 billion in return over time is more than worth the effort to do so.
Yeah. So you make a good point. I mean, it's great. It's great that we have these policies from the state to push clean energy development, but it has to be done with a plan, like you said too. Otherwise, you get ridiculously high prices, like they had in Germany, or you get, rolling brownouts or worse, like we're having in California. So,
Right.
yeah.
I would say, and then the last part is, I know we're going back and forth a lot on this article. I think one thing that maybe states should look at, or regional governments too, look at creating some sort of acceptability matrix, right? In terms of where people want to see clean energy being implemented on the ground, and also compare that with unemployment rates and income levels in those areas. Look at health, deterioration. We're going to talk a lot about this season about people in urban areas who disproportionately suffer the negative effects of, pollution and in the water, in the air, et cetera. And so I think this can be a targeted type of rejuvenation of renewable energy power generation. And it has to be done so in the context of what areas want it the most and need it the most within your state. And, let's put politics aside and let's look at doing what exactly is necessary to really rejuvenate these economies and the people there within.
Yeah, totally. And let's not point our solar panels north in the northern hemisphere. That would be a good idea too.
Does that have something? Why have something to do with magnets?
Away from the sun, which I've actually seen. So
no, well, this is an old adage, but Germany is one of the best, highest in, per capita solar developers in the world, and they also have one of the least amount of sun development or sunshine in the country. So, if you're smart about it, you can make it work.
Yeah, correct.
All right. Yes. I'm glad I only have 3 articles today because my voice seems to be going in and out. I sound like Barry White, I think. Barry White does clean tech. So my next 2 articles are slightly tied together, mainly for the fact that they're both out of one of my favorite vehicle publications, It's Charged Electric Vehicles Magazine. The website is chargedevs.com. I just think they're fantastic at covering the industry. This was on September 7th by Charles Morris, and it's called New Report Identifies High Priority Regions for Electrifying Trucks. Now, if you're on our YouTube page and you see the photo, you see those big Class 8 semis, and you think, oh, we're talking about intercontinental cross-country routes. But actually, there's a couple organizations, including, go back up a little bit. There's a couple organizations, the North American Council for Freight Efficiency and the Rocky Mountain Institute are collaborating on a report talking about prioritizing geographic regions for electric truck deployments. And what's kind of fascinating about this is exactly the same thing. They're looking about feasibility and range. They're looking about charging infrastructure. They're looking about population. They're looking about, traffic flows and logistics. And they identified, I think, 4 or 5 regions, and I think you got it right there. Northern Southern California, the Texas Triangle, Cascadia, the Rocky Mountain Front Range, and the Northeast as being areas that really should begin implementing a coordinated system for electric truck deployment. I think this is fantastic. I think they go on a little bit further and they talk about the fact that, for a 300-mile type of range for a truck delivery, that's kind of in a closed circuit where it ends up in the same spot every evening, that these are great areas to really begin vehicle electrification. And what I also like about these areas too is these would be the beginning of an implementation of probably a greater infrastructure for cross-country electric vehicles, electric trucks and commercial trucks. But they're starting in the points that need it the most and that would sustain it the most. So I really like this article. Again, it just gets right to the point that it's a small article. It just really gets right to the point which is we can have electric vehicle commercial trucks in the United States and we can do so effectively. Let's just be smart about it.
Yeah, there's a great comment in here too from the Director of Global Sustainability for UPS. If you think about it, UPS delivery trucks would be a fantastic application for EVs. They're constantly starting and stopping. That's every time you start, you're burning fuel. Every time you stop, you're wasting fuel as heat. And so if that was electric, you would get all that in regen. And they'd be fantastic for a delivery truck type of concept where they go out on their route and then they come back and they recharge. And, that would be a perfect example of having a fleet that uses EVs. So this is really, really encouraging. I like to see this.
Right, and those box trucks are fascinating because we're not there yet on the cost benefit. But imagine putting some solar panels on the roof of those trucks.
Yeah.
And I think you can do so now, but I don't think there's a real benefit in terms of how much charge you get out of that during the course of one cycle. But I think in a couple of years, that could be much more significant in terms of the range you get from it. So there's a lot of things that can be talked about, but I just like the idea that we're taking it beyond niche electric vehicles that people can who can afford a brand new Tesla can get one. We're now talking about more practical applications. UPS has always been, and FedEx, they've always been on the forefront. I think they even have CNG powered vehicles. So they've always been looking at alternatives, and they will be a mass adopter, and let's hope so.
Yeah, cool.
That was a short one. Then my second article from Charge TVs, I really like the story because this is something that I think is essential. We need to be thinking like a chess match, 2 or 3 steps ahead in terms of where we're going with all the waste product that's going to be generated from the next generation of power generation on renewable. And so this is from August 27th by Charles Morris. And Li-Cycle recovers usable battery grade materials from shredded lithium ion batteries. Now, this is not a straight out article. It's more of an interview with the CEO of Li-Cycle, a gentleman named AJ Klochar. And he is out of Canada, out of Ontario. And I've been waiting for this type of article about this type of company. And I found some fascinating tidbits in here. And a couple of them are, when you think about battery recycling right now, they talk about it being a thermal process where effectively the battery is melted. And the reason why the battery is melted is because you have plastics, you have metals that are surrounding the battery. Then you actually have the cell itself. And the cell has precious metals in there like cobalt, nickel, copper. And so most battery recycling isn't actually saving the lithium. The lithium's getting burned off. So all you're really going for are the precious metals that are used in a variety of applications. Well, if we're going to be growing electric vehicles and we're going to be growing the usage of lithium ion batteries, we need to have a better process in place. So usually Lucas and I are trying to focus on promoting one company over another. But in this particular case, it seems like Li-Cycle really does have a very good approach. They actually have 2 approaches towards lithium ion battery recycling, mechanical and chemical process. The mechanical process is a way to kind of cut away all the periphery materials in the battery, the plastics, the metal packaging, etc. And then they go right to the battery itself. And then they have a proprietary chemical process. They don't do a deep dive in that because, of course, it's probably a secret. But they're able to actually not just remove the lithium, but also the other metals as well. But the lithium itself can be rejuvenated and returned to sale to lithium battery manufacturers at the same quality grade as stuff coming right out of the mine, if not better. And they talk about the fact that different batteries have different formulas that use lithium in different ways, and their process is able to strip that out. And so there's applicability. Also, from a regulatory standpoint and logistics standpoint, one thing that's really fascinating is there's a lot of regulations about transporting used batteries because of safety considerations, i.e. fire risks. Well, according to this article, the CEO, they've eliminated that. So they are actually mitigating at kind of using a hub and spoke system. On the spoke side of it, they're able to kind of incapacitate the harmfulness of the battery right at the application or the location where they're picking up and sourcing it. But the hub where they're processing it in order for it to be sold back into the battery supply chain, the transportation costs could be lower because the safety protocols aren't as required, in for the fact that they're transporting a much safer material from the spoke to the hub. And then from there, it can be sold off. So you're talking about a value proposition, and I've been using that phrase a lot lately, but you're talking about a good value proposition. You're talking about saving lithium along with the other metals, and then even the plastics and non-expensive metals like aluminum, et cetera, are sold back into their natural recycling supply chains. So this is another great read. And again, it's a very long one, but I think for people who are starting to think about what do we do with waste materials, i.e. wind turbine blades, obsolete solar cells that have a lot of chemicals, these solutions need to present themselves sooner than later. And lithium ion batteries is certainly one of them. So I'm a fan of the company. I hope it works out for them. And I thought this was a great interview that really kind of sets it forward. So
Yeah, I love to see this. This is a really difficult job. I mean, you can see in these images, I mean, what they're dealing with, trying to make something useful out of this giant pile of, you know, chewed up batteries. So I applaud them for doing this. I think we can all agree that we all want a sustainable circular economy. I would like to be sustained. I don't know about you, but I would like our species to be sustained. So it's not just about being clean or green. Sustainability is a clearly understandable concept that whatever you do, you have to be able to perpetuate that forever, and that means recycling and reusing, right? So we have to get this right, and I understand it's really hard. So it's really good to see them tackling this. They say they're not 100% of the way there, but we need to do this. This is super important. So it's really good to see this.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about this, at the end, they're talking about the fact that some critics of electric vehicles say electric vehicles are only as clean as the source energy that goes into them. So if you live in a state that is powered by coal, then you know what, is your electric vehicle all that clean? And my argument to that has always been, well, the electric vehicle can be there for the next 10, 15 years while your state makes a transition from coal to green energy, from fossil fuels. So you take the car out of the equation, as Bob Lutz at GM used to say. And this is kind of on the other side of it too. People can criticize, rightfully so, that solar
Right.
panels are not very easy and very green to manufacture. Same thing with lithium ion batteries.
Right.
So if you introduce a recycling process into it that is cost effective and market driven, then you're taking the argument away from the skeptics. And
Yeah.
that is essential for the credibility of sustainability.
Yeah. It's not good enough to just be green. We have to be sustainable. We have to be closed circle. So yeah.
Green on green, like our shirts today.
Yeah.
Mine's a little
Right.
yellow. So, anyways, I thought I only had three articles, but I thought they were all three were very significant. I really like the New York one again. Take a deep dive into that, and from a technology standpoint, battery recycling is something that should be on everyone's priority if you believe in clean tech. So, I'm good.
Agreed. I'd like to see them be successful. Okay. Am I up? I'm up.
You are up, ready to go.
All right. Good deal. So my first article is from Utility Dive, obviously. It's like I always have Utility Dive article, but they cover the issues that I want to address. So this article is called "Propelling the Transition: The Battle for Control of Virtual Power Plants is Just Beginning." This is from Matthew Bandick, published on August 18th. So they're talking about virtual power plants developing. So just so if people don't know, generally speaking, a virtual power plant is like a solar panel with storage attached to it so that you can kind of deploy the power from the solar at a scheduled time, just like you could any old power plant, although any old meaning fossil fueled power plant. But in this case, it's not a fossil fuel power plant. So that's the virtual part of it. It's a solar panel with a battery, or it's a wind turbine with a battery, or something like this, so that it's controllable. Now it's not uncontrolled and unpredictable. Um, there's a lot of discussion about how are we going to do this. So if we have 1 million people put solar panels on their homes and install batteries, how are we going to manage all these things? Somebody has to be sending signals or prices or something, and there has to be some intelligence as to whether they should, charge or return power to the grid, or, when should a person's home be consuming power, when should it be conserving power? If we're going to have smart appliances like smart dishwashers and smart washers, that run at the optimal time, like how are you going to figure out what this optimal time is? So that's a lot about what this article is about. Utilities are pursuing these DERMS technologies. So that's distributed energy resources, that's DER, and MS is management system. So it's an IT system that is supposed to coordinate all these. And so there's a lot of discussion right now about who's going to run these DERs. Can we even do these DERs? I mean, it's kind of like big data. It's kind of a buzzword right now. Everybody says they're doing it, but nobody knows what they're doing. But everybody's got a demo, and everybody has a press release that says they're doing it. But it's not really, we don't know if it's going to scale yet, right? So the ISOs have looked into some of this stuff and said it takes too much computing power and time to schedule all these things like by some giant optimization engine. So I think there needs to be some innovation here. I think maybe just sending price signals might be good enough, but I have some reservations about that. So a lot of this is still being figured out. Utilities even want to come in and control things. They want you to sign up for a program where they get to control your battery and they dispatch it when they want. And in exchange, you'll get paid, much like the air conditioning demand response programs now, right? The utilities can call your air conditioner and shut it off on peak, and then they pay you, when they do that. So, which I definitely encourage people to do, especially in California right now. They are begging for people for demand response programs. So please look into that if you're at all interested. So I guess the conclusion is it still hasn't been figured out. We're still trying to figure out the best way to do this. I know FERC is involved. I know we covered that a couple of weeks ago, that FERC has a new rule about allowing, small scale storage in the wholesale grids. So there's still a lot going on here. So we're going to keep an eye on this. It's an interesting story if you want to watch this.
Yeah, I thought this was a very thought-provoking story. And, it really comes down to maybe a question that I've been avoiding to ask myself internally, which is there's still the fight out there between distributed energy and, centralized power generation, right? And utilities seem to be kind of dipping their toes into distributed model. And part of it, I think, is they're doing it is because the PUCs are asking to do it because there's political pressure. Nobody knows what the future really is going to be. Are we going to have a completely distributed system of power generation in 100 years? Or is it going to be a hybrid in between? And this article just got me thinking about that. And unfortunately, I don't have an answer, and I don't think anybody does. But I think that the technology should be incubated and developed to put us in a position where we can start making those decisions about what's effective. And I think this article kind of made me think that we are on our way. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I definitely think there is that battle between distributed and centralized still going on. And I think maybe it's not as oppositional as I would think. I think maybe the focus will just shift away from the transmission grid, which we now see as the backbone and the stability, and it'll shift to the distribution grid being the backbone and the stability, and the transmission lines complement that. So maybe just, the topology of the electric grid will change, and not necessarily the components, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. We have a lot of thinking. What I worry about is, and maybe the banker investor side of me thinks about this a lot. Are we spending a lot of capital today on things that are still going to be obsolete because we take a different path? It's the VHS versus beta, and I think we have to develop all solutions right now. But at some point, we have to come to the point where we got to make a decision about the best path forward on a coordinated basis.
Yeah, and like you were saying, Joe talked about that, right? Why are we building new natural gas plants with 30-year lives when we plan to be carbon free in 2045, right? That's still going to be operational in 2045. So yeah, we have to think about that.
That's Joe Silver of Urban Future Lab, episode 7 of our first season.
Yeah, so go back
and
watch.
Not Joe Plummer from
Joe Sixpack from 2016, right? Okay, good article. I'm going to move on here.
Yeah.
We love articles from local news sources too. So when I saw this, I just had to bring it on. This is from New Jersey's 101.5. I guess it's a radio station that had this article. I don't know how they got the scoop on this, but I love it. It's great. Clean energy break. New Jersey may consider creating its own electric grid. This is great. Michael Simmons published this August 17th. So this was a while ago when we were on break. So the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is part of the current administration, which is all I'm going to say, has been looking into some of the grid rules and making some changes, and some small government, state government agencies have been unhappy with these changes. And so we can see the Murphy administration is actually appealing one FERC decision in court. So what they may do is break from their multi-state ISOs and RTOs. So actually New Jersey is part of the PJM interconnect, which is an RTO, I believe, which is Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. It's a multi-state connected grid marketplace. And so their jurisdiction becomes federal because they cross state lines. And so it's easy to get away from that jurisdiction if you just cut the lines at your state and make a new marketplace. For instance, the NISO is its own ISO. I believe they still follow FERC rules and regulations, but it would make the jurisdiction a little cleaner. So New Jersey is talking about doing this to further their clean energy plans. So I really thought this was interesting and really showing how far states are willing to go to make progress on clean energy.
Yeah, and just to confirm, RTO is a regional transmission organization, correct?
Right, correct.
Let's make sure people know it's not Return to Zero, which was a rock band out of the 80s that was very good. Yeah, it's funny. I love the fact that it's a great local article. It's, again, very thought-provoking. Realistically, we all need to stay interconnected. And just, we've had too many blackouts and brownouts and transmission problems that if this is a way for posturing on the government level by New Jersey to help get the regional grid more efficient and make it a little more fair for everyone from a kind of a infrastructure payment standpoint, that's fine. But personally, this reminds me of like every 10 years, Quebec's trying to secede from Canada. Texas, Texas always says that they have the right to secede from the United States.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. Good for you guys. Better to stay interconnected. It's better for all of us down the road.
Yeah, Texas has their own RTO, and I joke that that's because they're going to secede any day now. But
yeah, no, I think that they actually have it in their state constitution, right? Because of the way they became part of the United States. They were an independent entity already.
Yeah. I mean, but you make a good point. I mean, we've said before, there's a lot of renewable energy resources distributed around the country, and we really need these things connected together. So we really need a federal solution. And, it's upsetting to me that if your group is deciding to get in the way of progress and get in the way of innovation and stop change that we need, all you do is make yourself irrelevant. Because we need this and we're going to do it.
Right.
If you're against it, then you're just going to be pushed aside. So, join us, figure out a way to make this work, figure out a way to make everybody happy. I think we can do that, and let's move forward.
I agree 100%. It's also about resiliency too. I mean, the 2003 blackout, resolved itself over time because you're able to draw power from different sources of the grid on an interstate basis, if I recall correctly. You probably know better than I do, but I just feel like it's important for there to be regional interconnection.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's something else we can talk about, which has been going on. So we can bring that up on a future episode. Okay, my last article here from Green Tech Media, which I also love and I read a lot, so I have them on a lot. The current system of electric billing no longer makes sense. Here are some suggestions for fixing it. This is from Dan C., August 14th. I think the no longer makes sense. I mean, I don't think it's made sense for a while now. But the main point is that, about 70% of your bill right now is based on, well, I take that back. Yeah, probably about 75% of your bill is based on how much energy you consume in your home or your abode or your facility. And oddly, the cost of providing that is not based on how much energy you draw. It's based on your peak power demand during that period, because that's what the utility has to build infrastructure for. That's what how they size your wire. That's how they size your transformer. That's how they size their substations. Well, all these things are fixed assets that don't change whether you use it or not. They have to invest that money and pay that loan for that equipment, whether you use it or not. So we really need to get away from this per kilowatt hour per energy pricing on your utility bill. And we need to get towards this, they call it a KWNCP or KWCP. This is a coincident peak. So that's your peak demand at system peak, and non-coincident peak. That's your peak demand when during the month, let's say. That number alone should determine your power bill. And even for like single family residents, you would get a fixed cost bill. And if you think about it, it's just like your cable internet, right? You don't get a cable internet bill based on how many gigabytes you download, right? You get a cable internet plan based on how fast you want to download internet. And then whether you use it or not, you pay the same amount. And the grid is very much like that. They have a great graph here that shows you here. In the red, those are non-variable costs. So 75% of your bill is just fixed, and only 25% varies on whether you use it or not. This is the exact opposite of what you get billed for. You get 75% on the variable and 25% on the fixed. So this leads to a lot of inequity, right? So people who use a lot of energy are paying too much, and people who don't use any energy aren't paying for the infrastructure that's hooked up to their facility. So we need to fix this, and I've been harping on this for years, as Eric knows, and I just wish we would get this done already. It gives cleaner signals to people to invest. Like, how are you going to invest in solar panels and battery if you don't know what impact it's going to have on your bill? Because you get billed depending on various different things. It just makes things so much cleaner and easier to handle.
Yeah, so I have to admit, I didn't read this article ahead of time, and I wish I did. I just ran out of time today. But the question is it more appropriate now to have this conversation because the technology is there to assist the consumer on when to use electricity? And what I mean by that is we're talking about smart appliances, right? Your washer and dryer could be used when the system is not being used as much. So as a result of that, you can be priced and billed for the electricity used at a lower rate because you're doing it not during a peak period during the day. Same thing with electric vehicle charging. 20 years from now, 80% of households could have electric vehicles. So is the technology there to protect and save and benefit the consumer that would justify the this type of billing to help and assist the utilities? Can it be a win-win is what I'm saying.
Oh, definitely. Especially if you have time of use pricing or something like this. Yeah, I mean, if you add a level 2 EV charger to your home and you think you're doing good for the grid by charging, and you're charging on peak hour, you're putting a big load right on peak hour. So, right, having clear signals to the consumer about, when they can charge, how they can level out their demand so that, the usage of the grid is more consistent and easier to plan and easier to manage. So a lot of that would come from just changing your bill and making your bill more clearly connected to the costs that you're incurring in the grid.
Or an easier solution is just houses have batteries and that, they would charge overnight, and then you don't have to worry about your electric vehicle not getting charged until 3 in the morning because you can charge it during the day because that power was generated into the battery at an overnight at a lower rate. I think that's holding back people in electric vehicles. That if there's peak pricing, but people don't want to come home, and the first thing they want to do is charge their vehicle in case there's a family emergency. They want to be able to use that vehicle, right? There's still that range anxiety, battery anxiety.
Yep.
So maybe battery is part of the solution to this as well.
Yeah, and that's peak hour, and so if you give people clear billing on this and time of use rates, then on peak hour when prices are high, people will by themselves use their battery to provide energy into the grid, and they'll get paid this critical peak, is coincident peak rate, instead of paying it, right? And then you don't need a DERMS system to tell people to discharge their battery right now. They can just figure it out based on clear pricing signals, which would be in this format.
Well, I guess then again, are we looking at these articles in a vacuum or in a silo? Because this article here is talking about something that somewhat contradicts the DERMS system that's going to spend a lot of money, but maybe unnecessary if we actually just refocus on the way we bill customers.
Right. Clear price signals. And, as an economist, you have to go with the market every time, right?
So you'd rather have price signals than DERMS, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think DERMS is just going to end up being too complex and too difficult to implement and have some other complexities, which I actually discuss in my book chapter, which I can have a link to if you're super interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's all for me.
Yeah, I thought we didn't have a lot of stories today, but I think it was by design because I think the stories we had have a lot of intensity regarding data and where we're taking the grid, where we're taking electric vehicles, and where we're taking the growth from a policy standpoint and an execution standpoint. So there was a lot to absorb in this first week. It was a good way to get back into the flow for season 2, I thought.
Yeah, articles were pretty heavy. Those pretty heavy topics. Um, I apologize if it wasn't super exciting and super fun, but this stuff is important to talk about. So I'm glad to see we're making progress, and there's still work to be done. So we need to keep moving forward. So very
Yeah,
exciting times.
yeah, and just kind of part of my couple closing thoughts. A good friend of mine from graduate school lives here in New York State, but she's from a small town in Oregon, 8,000 people, called Staten. And Staten, Oregon had to completely evacuate, I guess, last night because of the wildfires that are just plaguing the Pacific Northwest all the way down to Northern California. And, 3 days ago, Denver, Colorado had a peak temperature of 101 degrees. And then yesterday they had snow. So if you want to tell me that climate change, for those who don't believe climate change is having a negative impact, just look around you. How more often are we talking about wildfires in the summer and the intensity level of them? How much more are we talking about, storms that are more volatile than they used to be and more rapid, and temperature changes that are more rapid? We need to take care of this as soon as possible. And this is why, we are going to have days like today where our articles are a little bit more intense. Maybe they're a little bit more technical. They're not as fun and light, but we need to have those stories.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Atlantic hurricane season. I mean, it's already record breaking. It continues to break records, every week, it seems like. We had the earliest O-named storm. They're worried they're going to run out of names. And then after that, they have Greek letters. Now they're worried they're going to run out of Greek letters because we're not even halfway through the storm season yet. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. If you want to get depressed, just go look at the current concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere from the Mauna Loa Observatory. It just keeps going up. And we need, last I checked, it was like 418 parts per million. We need it down to 350 to stop this heating. So, we haven't even stopped it going up yet. I mean, we got to get moving. So, and then we got to get it back down to 350. So there's still a lot of work to do. It's a big job, but we're here and we're going to do it, right?
We're going to do it. And I think that's a great segue because I think a lot of our guests that we're going to be lining up for season 2 are going to be directly talking about carbon capture or, carbon reduction. You brought it up in season 1, the fact that we can't just talk about, carbon zero. It's got to be carbon negative. And I know some of the big companies are touting that from a PR standpoint, Microsoft, Amazon, and God bless them for it. We need more of it and we need it sooner.
Yeah, I think I'm going to invite, at least one attorney. Some of the most powerful attorneys in the power markets are here in New York City. So it's great if we could get them on. I think we're going to have Sarah next week, which should be exciting. We have a great company that they're good friends of mine that are doing community solar. It's totally kicking off here in New Jersey. They have a large pilot program going on right now. And it's great. It's something you can sign up for. You don't have to put solar panels on the top of your building. You don't have to drill a hole in your roof. You just sign up for a share in a large community solar development somewhere else. And then you get residential net metering on your bill. It's fantastic. So yeah, we're going to have some great guests. It's going to be really cool.
I think we're also going to have some guests from some other countries, including our potential friends to the north.
Oh.
So we have a lot to talk about and a lot to be involved in this season. So, just again, Lucas and I want to thank everybody for fantastic feedback, but some of it critical, and we love hearing that. We want to get better, and we want to address people's concerns. And, we have many venues to reach out and to follow us, YouTube, and then also almost every major podcast forum now holds Pirates of Clean Tech.
Yeah, and so on each of those, you can click the follow, and then you'll get a notification when our new podcast gets posted. And you can also find us on YouTube, Pirates of Clean Tech. You can click subscribe, and then you have to click the bell button, and then you get a notification when our video gets posted, so you can be the first to know.
Yeah, and along with this video on World EV Day, we're going to be posting some EV reviews starting today as well. So we're going to have a lot of fun this season. And always our fun little disclaimer, the views that we express are solely those of ourselves, not any organizations we're affiliated with. I sound very lawyerly when I say that.
Yeah.
It's been great. We're back.
Yeah, we're back. We're setting sail. It's a good time.
Yar.
I got shorter hair.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big development. That probably took a couple weeks of your off season, I think, having that haircut.
Still curly.
That was good. You look like you should be playing at Wimbledon right now, not the U.S. Open.
Do I look like Andy Murray? A little bit, huh?
Andy Murray got the green shirt, right? I think green is more Wimbledon.
It's U.S. Open time, though.
It is.
Djokovic's out. Shocker.
Well, don't hit a tennis ball at a line judge. Moral of the story.
Noted. Thank you.
Stay tuned for our sports podcast coming up. The Pirates of Tennis.
All right, buddy.
All right. Well, on behalf of the Pirates, I'm Eric Planey.
I'm Lucas Finko.
Be well, and we'll talk to you next episode.
Yar.
Yarr.
Yar.
Yarr.